The starving alien family had nothing, until a human gave them hope and shelter. Part 1: The Crash. The escape pod was burning. Fire covered the small metal shell as it fell through the sky of a strange blue planet. Inside held her two children as tightly as she could. Her daughter was crying. Her baby son was too weak to make any sound at all. Was afraid. She had been afraid for a very long time now. 3 cycles ago, the Dominion had come to her. The people had lived in peace for thousands of years. They were not warriors. They did not have weapons. When the Dominion ships appeared in their sky, her people could only run. Millions died in the first attack. The cities burned. The oceans turned black with poison. Had grabbed her children and run to the evacuation ships. Her husband had pushed them inside the ship and promised to follow. The doors closed before he could reach them. She never saw him again. The colony ship carried 2,000 survivors. They traveled through space for many months, looking for a safe place to hide. But the Dominion found them near this small planet called Earth. Their ships attacked without warning. The colony vessel broke apart like glass. Had thrown her children into an escape pod and climbed in after them. She pressed the launch button just as fire consumed the main ship. Through the small window, she watched 2,000 of her people die in the cold darkness of space. Now the pod was falling. The planet below was mostly blue and green, with white clouds covering parts of it. It looked peaceful. It looked alive, but knew nothing about this world or the creatures that lived on it. The pod hit the ground hard. Everything went dark. When woke up, her head was bleeding. Purple blood ran down her face and dripped onto the metal floor. She could hear wind howling outside. Cold air was coming through cracks in the broken pod. Cold, the most dangerous thing for her species, came from a desert world. Their bodies were made for heat and dry air. Cold made their blood slow down. Cold made their muscles stop working. Cold killed them faster than hunger or thirst. Pulled herself up and looked for her children. Was awake, shaking badly, her dark eyes wide with fear. She was only 6 cycles old, still a small child by standards. Her thin arms were wrapped around her own body, trying to stay warm. Was not moving, grabbed her baby son and held him close to her chest. He was still breathing, but barely. His skin was turning a darker shade of. He was getting too cold. "Mama," said, her voice shaking. "Mama, I am scared." "I know," little one said. "I am scared too, but we must be brave now." She looked around the broken pod. Most of their supplies had been destroyed in the crash. The heating system was dead. The communication device was broken into pieces. The food storage container had cracked open, and everything inside had spilled onto the ground and frozen solid. They had nothing. Wrapped both children in her own body, trying to share what little warmth she had. She could see through the cracked window that they had landed on a mountain. White powder covered everything. She later learned humans called it snow. The sky was and heavy. More white powder was falling from the clouds. The first day passed slowly. Did not sleep. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the colony ship exploding. She saw his face as the doors closed between them. She heard the screams of her people as fire took them. She kept her children close and waited for help that she knew would never come. On the second day, stopped crying. This frightened more than the crying had. A child who cried was a child who still had strength. A child who went silent was a child who was giving up. Said softly, "Talk to me, little one. Tell me about your favorite memory." His dark eyes looked empty. "I cannot remember anything good, Mama. I can only remember the fire." His heart broke into pieces. Her daughter was only 6 cycles old, and already she had seen more horror than anyone should see in a lifetime. The war had stolen her childhood. The escape had stolen her father, and now the cold was stealing what little hope she had left. Made a small sound, a weak cry that faded almost as soon as it started. Looked at her baby son and felt tears freeze on her face. He was dying. She could see it happening. His body was shutting down piece by piece, trying to save energy, but there was no energy left to save. By the third day had accepted the truth. They were going to die on this frozen mountain. No one was coming to save them. They were scattered across the galaxy, running and hiding. No one even knew they were here. She held her children and whispered old songs to them. Songs her mother had sung to her. Songs about warm suns and red sand and the beauty of their lost world. Songs that now felt like funeral prayers. Had stopped moving. She was still breathing, but her eyes were closed and she would not respond when called her name. The cold had taken her deep into sleep, the kind of sleep that did not wake up from. Had not made a sound in many hours, was afraid to check if he was still alive. She was afraid of what she would find. This is how it ends, she thought. Not in battle, not in fire, but alone and frozen on a planet that does not even know we exist. She closed her eyes and prepared to join her children in the long sleep. She thought of her parents who had died in the first attack. She thought of her home, now nothing but ash and memory. At least we will be together again, she thought. At least the pain will finally stop. Then she heard a sound, footsteps. Something was moving through the white powder outside the pod. Opened her eyes. Through the cracked window, she saw a shape moving toward them. It was walking on two legs but it was shorter and thicker. Its skin was covered with strange, colorful materials. Its face was flat with small eyes and a tiny nose. A native of this planet, a creature she had never seen before. Fear gripped her heart. She had no idea if this creature was friendly or dangerous. She had no idea if it would help them or hurt them. She had no weapons to defend her children. She had no strength left to run. The creature came closer. It stopped at the edge of the broken pod and looked inside. Its small eyes went wide when it saw them. For a long moment it just stood there, staring. Waited for it to attack. She waited for it to run away screaming. She waited for it to do something violent or cruel. Instead, the creature did something she did not expect. It knelt down in the snow. It held out its hands, palms up, showing that they were empty, and it spoke in a soft, gentle voice. Did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. The creature was not afraid of them. The creature wanted to help. For the first time in 3 days, felt something other than fear and despair. She felt a tiny spark of hope. The creature spoke again and made a gentle gesture with its hands. It was asking them to come with it. It was offering them shelter from the cold. Looked at her dying children. She looked at the strange creature kneeling in the snow. She knew that following it could be a trap. She knew that this species might be cruel and violent. She knew nothing about this world or its people. But she also knew that staying in the pod meant certain death. And any chance at life, even a small one, was better than no chance at all. Slowly, painfully, gathered her children in her arms. She crawled toward the opening of the broken pod. The cold hit her like a physical blow, making her gasp in pain. The creature moved forward quickly. It took off part of its colorful covering and wrapped it around shoulders. The covering was warm, so wonderfully, beautifully warm. Looked into the creature's small eyes and saw something she recognized. Kindness, concern, compassion. Perhaps, she thought, perhaps this world is not so different from ours after all. The creature pointed down the mountain and spoke again, nodded weakly, showing that she understood. Together, they began the long walk through the snow. Did not know it yet, but this strange creature, this human, would change everything. He would give her family something they had lost long ago. He would give them hope. The starving alien family had nothing, until a human gave them hope and shelter. Part 2: The Farmer. Park had lived on the mountain for 63 years. He was born in the small farmhouse where his father was born and his grandfather before that. The house was old and simple, built from wood and stone, but it was strong. It had survived storms and floods and wars. It had survived everything the world had thrown at it. had survived too. He had been a soldier once when he was young and strong. He had fought in the border conflicts and seen terrible things. He had watched friends die in the mud and snow. He had killed men who probably had families waiting for them at home. The war had left scars on his body and deeper scars on his heart. After the war, he came back to the mountain. He married a woman named who had kind eyes and a gentle laugh. They worked the farm together for 35 years. They grew vegetables and raised chickens. They were not rich, but they were happy. Died 7 winters ago. A sickness in her chest that the doctors could not cure. Held her hand as she took her last breath. He buried her under the old tree behind the farmhouse, where they used to sit together and watch the sunset. His daughter begged him to move to Seoul. She said he was too old to live alone on the mountain. She said the winters were too cold and the work was too hard, but refused. The mountain was his home, was buried here. He would not leave. So he lived alone with his memories and his chickens and the endless quiet of the mountain. He woke up early every morning, made tea, and did his work. He talked to his grave when he felt lonely. He told her about the weather and the crops and the news from the village below. On the night the sky burned, was sitting on his porch drinking tea. He saw a bright light falling from the heavens. At first he thought it was a shooting star, but it was too big and too bright. It fell toward the mountain with a terrible roar and disappeared behind the trees. Felt the ground shake when it hit. He did not call anyone. The nearest village was an hour's walk away, and his old telephone rarely worked in winter. Instead, he went to bed and decided to investigate in the morning. When dawn came, put on his warmest clothes and took his walking stick. He followed the trail of broken trees and burned plants until he found the crash site. A metal shell lay half buried in the snow. Smoke was still rising from its surface. Strange symbols were written on its side, symbols that looked like no human language he had ever seen. Felt his heart beating fast. He had heard stories about things falling from the sky. Everyone had. The world had been waiting for proof that humans were not alone in the universe. Scientists searched for signals from distant stars. Governments built telescopes and sent probes into space. But no one expected the proof to land on a small mountain in Korea, discovered by a 63-year-old farmer with bad knees. Walked closer to the metal shell. He could see that it was broken open on one side. Something was moving inside. He should have been afraid. Any sensible person would have been afraid. These were creatures from another world, beings with unknown powers and unknown intentions. They could be dangerous. They could be monsters. But when looked through the opening, he did not see monsters. He saw a mother holding her children. The creatures were thin and with large, dark eyes that took up most of their faces. They had 4 fingers on each hand instead of 5. They had no hair and no ears, just smooth skin stretched over fragile bones. They looked strange and alien and completely unlike anything on Earth. But they also looked exactly like what they were, a family that was dying. Had seen starvation before. During the war, he had seen villages where people had nothing to eat. He had seen children with empty eyes and bloated bellies. He had seen mothers who gave their last scraps of food to their bobbies while they themselves wasted away. These creatures had the same look, the same desperation, the same acceptance of death. The mother was awake barely. She was holding 2 smaller creatures, children, realized. One was a young girl with the same large dark eyes. The other was a baby, limp and unmoving. The mother's arms were shaking from cold and exhaustion, but she did not let go of her children. She looked at with fear in her eyes. She was waiting for him to hurt her. Something broke inside's chest. He had spent 40 years trying to forget the war, trying to forget the pain and the horror. He had built walls around his heart to keep the memories out. But in that moment, all the walls came down. He saw his own daughter in that mother's arms. He saw his wife's face in those desperate eyes. He saw every refugee and every orphan and every victim of every war he had ever witnessed. These were not monsters. These were people, people who needed help. Did not think about calling the government. He did not think about the consequences or the dangers. He thought only about the baby that was too still, too quiet, too cold. He knelt down in the snow. Slowly, carefully, he held out his hands with his palms facing up. He wanted to show that he had no weapons. He wanted to show that he meant no harm. "I am not going to hurt you," he said softly. He knew the creature could not understand his words, but he hoped she could understand his voice. "Please, let me help." The mother stared at him for a long moment. Her dark eyes searched his face, looking for signs of danger, looking for reasons to be afraid. Did not move. He barely breathed. He just waited. Finally, something changed in the mother's expression. The fear did not go away completely, but it became smaller. A tiny spark of hope appeared in her eyes, hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found someone who would help. She nodded slowly, moved forward carefully, keeping his movements slow and gentle. He reached for the baby first, because the baby was the one closest to death. The mother flinched when he touched her child, but she did not stop him. She was too weak to stop him, and perhaps she understood that the baby needed more help than she could give. The baby felt like ice in its arms. Its skin was hard and cold, and its breathing was so shallow he could barely see it. But it was still breathing. That meant there was still hope. Wrapped the baby inside his thick winter coat, pressing it against his chest where his body heat could warm it. Then he reached for the young girl. She looked at him with eyes full of fear and confusion, but she did not fight. She was too tired to fight. "Come," said gently, "come with me, my home is warm." He helped the mother to her feet. She could barely walk, her legs were shaking and her steps were unsteady. Put his arm around her thin shoulders and guided her forward. She was so light, so fragile. It was like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in paper. The walk down the mountain was slow and difficult. The snow was deep and the wind was cold. His old legs ached with every step, but he did not stop. He could not stop. 3 lives depended on him reaching the farmhouse. The young girl walked beside them, holding onto her mother's hand. She kept looking up with those large, dark eyes, trying to understand what was happening, trying to understand why this strange creature was helping them. When they finally reached the farmhouse, felt relief wash over him. The house was warm inside. He had left the heating running before he went out. He guided the mother to the floor near the heat source and helped her sit down. Then he gently placed the baby in her arms. The mother held her child and started crying. Tears that looked like liquid silver ran down her face. She made sounds that could not understand, but he understood their meaning. She was thanking him. She was praying. She was hopping. Went to work. He brought every blanket he owned and wrapped the 3 creatures in warmth. He lit more fires and adjusted the heating to make the room as hot as possible. He boiled water and made warm broth. But when he tried to feed them, he discovered a problem. The creatures could not eat his food. The mother tried to drink the broth, but her throat made a strange sound and she pushed it away. The food was wrong for them somehow, not poison, but not nourishment either. Sat back and thought. He was a farmer, not a scientist. He had no idea what these creatures needed to survive. He did not even know what species they were or where they came from. But he knew someone who might be able to help. His niece worked in the city. She was a scientist who studied strange things, alien life, she called it, though until now it had all been theoretical. Rarely called her because his telephone did not work well, but this was an emergency. He picked up the phone and dialed her number. The connection was poor, full of static and noise, but her voice came through. "Uncle, is that you? What is wrong?" Looked at the 3 alien creatures huddled by his fire. The mother was holding her children close, sharing what little warmth she had. The baby was still too cold, still too still. Time was running out. He said slowly, "I need you to come to the mountain, right now, and bring every medicine and every supply you can carry." "Uncle, what happened? Are you hurt?" Paused. How could he explain something like this? How could he describe something that should not be possible? "Just come," he said finally. "And when you get here, do not scream, I have guests." He hung up the phone and went back to the creatures. The mother looked at him with those large, dark eyes and saw something that made his heart hurt. She was looking at him like he was her last hope in the universe. Perhaps he thought, perhaps he was. Sat down across from them and smiled gently. He pointed to himself and said his name. The mother watched him carefully. Then she pointed to herself and spoke a word that sounded like music made of whispers. It was a start. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The wind continued to howl. The world continued to turn, unaware that everything had just changed. In a small farmhouse on a frozen mountain, a human and 3 aliens sat together by the fire. They could not speak the same language. They came from different worlds. They had nothing in common except one thing. They were all just people trying to survive. And sometimes that was enough. The starving alien family had nothing, until a human gave them hope and shelter. Part 3. The Warmth of Strangers. Arrived at her uncle's farmhouse just before sunset. She had driven for 3 hours through snow and ice, her car sliding on the frozen roads. Her uncle's phone call had frightened her, never asked for help. He was the most stubborn man she had ever known. If he was asking her to come immediately, something was very wrong. She expected to find him injured. She expected a broken leg or a heart problem or some other emergency that comes with old age. She did not expect to find 3 skinned aliens sitting by his fireplace, wrapped in blankets like strange cocoons. Stood in the doorway with her mouth open. Her scientific training had taught her to expect the impossible, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. All those years of studying theoretical xenobiology, the science of alien life, and now the theory was sitting in her uncle's living room. "Close the door," said calmly. "You are letting the cold in." Stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was racing. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but the words would not come out. "Her name is," said, pointing to the largest alien. "The children are called, and at least that is what I think," she said. "Their language is difficult to understand." The alien mother was watching with large dark eyes. There was fear in those eyes, but also something else. Hope, desperate, fragile hope. Uncle finally managed to say, these are. "Yes," said simply, "they are." Walked closer, moving slowly so she would not frighten them. The mother held her children, but she did not run. She was too weak to run. Could see that now. She could see the bones pushing against the skin. She could see the trembling muscles and the exhausted eyes. "They are starving," said, "and the baby is dying." "I tried to feed them," said, "but they cannot eat our food. The mother tried and became sick." Knelt down next to the aliens and studied them carefully. Their bodies were similar to human bodies in some ways, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, but different in others. Their skin was thick and rough, like the skin of a desert lizard. Their eyes were too large for their faces, designed to see in bright sunlight. Their fingers were long and thin, with small suction pads at the tips. "They are from a hot world," said quietly. "A desert world. Look at their skin, their eyes. Their bodies are made for heat, not cold." "That is why they were dying in the snow," said. Nodded. "The cold slows their metabolism. It makes their bodies shut down if you had not found them." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. She opened her medical bag and took out her equipment. She had brought everything she could think of: medicines, tools, testing supplies. She did not know what she would find, but she wanted to be ready for anything. "I need to examine them," she said. "Can you tell them that I want to help? I do not want to frighten them." Spoke softly too, using simple words and gentle gestures. Watched the communication happen without language, a conversation of hands and eyes and expressions. It was beautiful in a strange way. 2 beings from different worlds, finding a way to understand each other. Nodded slowly. She unwrapped her baby son and held him out toward. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were full of tears. She was trusting a stranger with her child's life. Took the baby carefully. He was so small, so light. His skin was cold and his breathing was shallow. She checked his vital signs with her equipment, adjusting the settings to account for his alien biology. His body temperature is too low, she said. His heart rate is slow. His organs are shutting down to save energy. She looked at and saw the terror in the mother's eyes. But he is still alive. We can save him if we act quickly. Worked for hours. She tested the aliens' blood and analyzed their biology. She discovered that their bodies needed certain nutrients that human food did not contain. She also discovered that some human foods were actually toxic to them, not deadly, but enough to make them sick. Their bodies are based on different chemistry, she explained too. They need specific minerals and proteins that are rare on Earth, but not impossible to find. She made phone calls. She contacted other scientists she trusted. She ordered special supplies from laboratories in the city. She did not tell anyone the full truth, not yet. She said she was working on an experiment, a theoretical project that required unusual materials. The supplies arrived the next day, brought by a delivery drone that landed in the snow outside the farmhouse. Worked through the night, mixing and testing and adjusting. Finally, she created something that looked like pale green soup. "This should work," she said, holding up the bowl. "It contains the nutrients they need. It might not taste good, but it will keep them alive." Looked at the green liquid with suspicion. She had been tricked before, hurt before, betrayed before. She did not trust easily, but sat beside her and smiled gently. He scooped up a small amount of the liquid with a spoon and pretended to drink it himself. Then he offered the spoon to. "Trust," his eyes seemed to say. "Please trust us." Took the spoon. She drank the liquid. Her body did not reject it. Her throat did not close. Instead, she felt something she had not felt in days, warmth spreading through her chest, energy returning to her muscles. She looked at with wide eyes. Then she looked at her baby son, still weak and cold in the blankets. She said, pointing to the baby. Understood. She prepared a bottle of the nutrient liquid and brought it too. The mother held her son close and carefully fed him drop by drop. At first, nothing happened. The baby was too weak to swallow. But then slowly something changed. The baby's throat moved. He swallowed again. His breathing became stronger. His skin became warmer. And then baby opened his eyes and cried. It was a small sound, weak and tired, but it was the sound of life, the sound of hope, the sound of survival. Began crying too. She held her baby against her chest and rocked him gently, tears streaming down her face. Crawled closer and wrapped her thin arms around her mother and brother. The three of them held each other and cried together. Watched with tears in his own eyes. Stood beside him, her scientific mind overwhelmed by the simple beauty of the moment. "They came from the stars," whispered. "They traveled across the galaxy, survived a war, escaped an attack, and they ended up here, in your farmhouse, with you." "The universe works in strange ways," said. "What are we going to do?" asked. "We cannot keep them hidden forever. The government will want to know. Scientists will want to study them. Reporters will want stories. The whole world will want to see them." Was quiet for a long moment. He watched feeding her children, watched the color slowly returning to their skin. He thought about all the things that could happen if the world found out about these creatures. The fear, the curiosity, the greed, the chaos. "Not yet," he said finally. "They are not ready. They are still weak and scared. They need time to heal. They need time to feel safe." "But uncle—" "I am an old man," said firmly. "I have lived long enough to know that some things are more important than rules and governments. Right now, the most important thing is keeping them alive. Everything else can wait." Looked at her uncle with new respect. She had always thought of him as a simple farmer, a man who lived a quiet life in a quiet place. But there was strength in him that she had never seen before. Strength and kindness and courage. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Keep making the food," said. "Help them get stronger, and do not tell anyone, not yet, not until they are ready." Nodded, "I will do what I can." Over the next few weeks, life in the farmhouse found a strange new rhythm. Came every few days, bringing supplies and checking on the aliens' health. Took care of them daily, making sure they had food and warmth and whatever comfort he could provide. Grew stronger each day. She started helping around the house, cleaning and organizing and trying to be useful. She could not speak Korean, but she was learning. Every day would point to objects and say their names. Table, chair, window, fire, food. Would repeat the words in her musical voice, sometimes getting them right, sometimes getting them wonderfully wrong. Recovered faster than her mother. Children are strong that way. They adapt and heal and find joy even in the darkest places. She started following around the farm, watching him work, helping him feed the chickens. The chickens were afraid of her at first, but they quickly got used to the strange girl who moved quietly and never made sudden motions. Baby grew stronger every day. He started making sounds, babbling in a language that was neither Korean nor but something new. He smiled when held him. He laughed when made funny faces. He reached for everything with his small four-fingered hands, curious about this strange new world. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountain, came to sit beside on the porch. She held a cup of the green nutrient drink in her hands, was drinking tea. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the colors change in the sky. Then spoke, her Korean still broken and uncertain. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for life." Smiled, "You would do the same for me." Thought about this. On her world, strangers did not help strangers. Resources were scarce. Survival was difficult. People took care of their own families and no one else. But maybe, she thought, maybe that was wrong. Maybe the way was not the only way. "Maybe," she said slowly, "maybe now I would." They sat together until the stars came out. Somewhere up there, past the atmosphere, past the moon, past the asteroid belt, the galaxy continued to burn. Wars still raged. Empires still conquered. Her people were still scattered and running. But here, on this small mountain, on this small planet, felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt safe. And for now, that was enough. The starving alien family had nothing, until a human gave them hope and shelter. Part 4: The Village. The secret did not stay secret for long. In a small mountain village, nothing ever did. It started with the delivery drones. Ordered supplies every week, special chemicals, unusual nutrients, strange equipment. The village postmaster noticed. He mentioned it to his wife. His wife mentioned it to her sister. Her sister mentioned it to grandmother, who ran the village tea shop and knew everything about everyone. Then there were the sounds. Farmers working in the fields near property heard strange noises, singing that did not sound human, laughter that was too high and musical. Some said they saw shadows moving in the windows at night, shadows with shapes that did not look right. Rumors spread like fire in dry grass. Some people said he'd gone crazy from living alone too long. Others said he was hiding criminals or fugitives from the law. Old grandmother, who was 93 years old and remembered the war, said he was sheltering demons from the underworld. 1 month after the crash, the village leader came to visit. His name was, he was a good man, fair and honest and respected by everyone. He had known for 40 years. They had fought together in the border conflicts. They had buried friends together in frozen ground. If anyone could handle this situation calmly, it was. But even was not prepared for what he saw. He found in the yard behind the farmhouse, teaching the alien child how to feed the chickens. Was holding a bowl of grain, scattering it on the ground while the chickens pecked at her feet. She was laughing. that strange, musical laugh that did not sound quite human and was smiling like a proud grandfather. Stood at the edge of the yard with his mouth open. His brain was telling him that what he was seeing was impossible. His eyes were telling him that it was real. He finally said, "What have you done?" Looked up calmly. He had been expecting this visit. He was surprised it had taken so long. "I found them on the mountain," he said simply. "They were dying, I helped them." They are not human." "No," agreed. "They are not, but they are still people." Had stopped feeding the chickens. She was looking at with her large, dark eyes, her body tense and ready to run. She had learned to recognize fear in human faces, and this new human's face was full of fear. Appeared in the doorway, holding baby against her chest. She saw the stranger and froze. Her hand moved toward her children protectively. "Please," said to, "do not frighten them. They have been through enough already." Was quiet for a long time. He looked at the mother clutching her baby. He looked at the child standing near the chickens. He looked at his old friend, standing between the aliens and the outside world like a shield. "The village is talking," said finally. "People are scared. Grandmother wants to call the government. She says these creatures are dangerous." "Grandmother thinks everything is dangerous," replied. "She also thinks mobile phones cause earthquakes." Despite the tension, almost smiled. "You know I cannot ignore this. I am the village leader. I have responsibilities." "Your responsibility is to the people of this village," said. "These are people. They are part of this village now." "They are not human. The government—" "The government will take them away," interrupted. "They will put them in laboratories and study them like animals. They will take the children from their mother. They will poke and prod and experiment until there is nothing left." His voice was hard now, harder than had ever heard it. "I will not let that happen." Was silent again. He looked at the alien family, really looked at them for the first time. The mother's eyes were full of fear, but also determination, the determination of someone who would die protecting her children. The girl was holding her mother's hand, trying to be brave despite her terror. The baby was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger. They did not look like monsters. They looked like refugees. Had seen refugees before. After the floods of 2034, families had come to the village looking for shelter. They had different accents and different customs and different ways of doing things. Some villagers had been suspicious of them. Some had been afraid. But in the end, the village had opened its doors and welcomed them in. Because that was what people did. That was what community meant. "If I keep this secret," said slowly, "I am putting the entire village at risk. If the government finds out we knew and did not report, everyone could face consequences." "Then let the village decide," said. "Bring everyone here. Let them see the truth. Let them make their own choice." Stared at him. "You want me to bring the entire village to meet aliens?" "I want you to bring them to meet a family," corrected. "A mother and her children who lost everything and need help. That is not so strange, is it? Families in need come to villages all the time." That evening, the village came to farm. They came in small groups, walking up the mountain path with lanterns and flashlights. There were farmers and teachers, shopkeepers and children, young people and old. They were nervous and curious and afraid, but they came anyway. In a small community, when something important happens, everyone wants to see it with their own eyes. Had prepared carefully. He arranged chairs in a circle around the fireplace. He made tea, both human tea and the green nutrient drink for. He asked to sit quietly with her mother and try not to be scared. When everyone had gathered, spoke. "I know you have heard rumors," he said. "I know some of you are afraid, but before you judge, I want you to listen. I want you to see." He told them everything. The crash on the mountain, the dying family in the snow, the long nights of uncertainty, the slow recovery. He told them about the lost world and the war that destroyed it. He told them about the children who had seen too much horror for their young ages. As he spoke, sat quietly with her children. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the tone. She understood that this old man was fighting for them, speaking for them, protecting them. When finished, there was silence. The villagers looked at the alien family. The alien family looked back at them. No one knew what to say. Then old grandmother stood up. Everyone held their breath. Grandmother was the strictest, most traditional person in the village. She had called these creatures demons. She had wanted to report them to the government. Surely she would not change her mind. Walked slowly toward, her old bones creaked with every step. Her wrinkled face was unreadable, tensed, ready to grab her children and run. But did not attack. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small wrapped package. She held it out toward. "Here," she said gruffly, "sweet rice cakes for the children. Children should have sweets." Looked at the package with confusion. She did not understand what was happening. Sighed impatiently and thrust the package into his hands. Take it, take it. My grandson always liked sweets when he was small. Your children will like them too, I think." She paused and looked at with sharp old eyes. "They cannot eat human food, yes. I will learn to make something they can eat. I am too old to learn new things, but I will try." She turned and walked back to her seat, muttering about how young people always made things complicated. For a moment no one moved. Then Butcher stood up. "Bone marrow," he said loudly. "Sneeze said you need special proteins. Bone marrow has good proteins. I can bring bone marrow every week." "I can bring milk," said Farmer. "Not cow milk. You probably cannot drink that, but goat milk might work. Can test it." "I can teach," said Schoolteacher. "The children should learn. Reading, writing, mathematics. Even aliens need education, yes." One by one, the villagers offered what they could. Food, clothes, blankets, help with the farm, medicine, friendship. Small things that cost little but meant everything. Watched this happen with tears in her eyes. She did not understand. On her world, strangers did not help strangers. Resources were hoarded. Survival was individual. Community was something that happened only within families. But these humans, these strange, small, soft-skinned creatures, were offering to share everything they had. They were opening their homes and their hearts to beings from another world. They were choosing kindness when fear would have been easier. Tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama," she whispered, "are these people good people?" Looked at the villagers, at their open faces and offering hands. She looked at who was smiling with tears on his weathered cheeks. She thought about all the evil she had seen in the galaxy, the conquerors, the destroyers, the ones who took and never gave. And she thought about all the good she was seeing now. "Yes, little one," she said, "these are very good people." By the end of the night, a plan had been formed. The village would keep the secret for now. They would help the alien family recover and grow strong. They would learn about each other, build trust, create bonds. And when the time was right, when everyone was ready, they would figure out how to tell the rest of the world. As the villagers walked back down the mountain, stopped beside. "You were right," he said quietly. "They are just people, different people but still people." Nodded. "Most things are less scary when you look at them closely." "What happens now?" Looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there the galaxy was still burning. Wars were still being fought. Evil was still winning. But here on this small mountain something good was happening, something that gave him hope. "Now," he said, "we become a community, a real one, where everyone belongs." Smiled, "Even aliens from outer space." Smiled back, "Especially aliens from outer space." In the farmhouse behind them was putting her children to bed, was already falling asleep, a small smile on her face. Baby was making happy sounds, his four-fingered hand wrapped around his mother's finger. For the first time since the destruction of their world, they had a home. It was a small home on a small planet in a small corner of the galaxy, but it was warm and safe and filled with people who cared about them. And for a family that had lost everything, that was more than enough. That was everything. The starving alien family had nothing, until a human gave them hope and shelter. Part 5: Hope Among the Stars. 6 months had passed since the crash. The seasons had changed on the mountain. The snow had melted, replaced by green grass and colorful flowers. Birds sang in the trees. The sun rose warm and gentle every morning. Life had returned to the world. Life had returned to the alien family as well. No longer looked like a starving refugee. Her skin was smooth and healthy. Her dark eyes were bright and alert. Her body was strong and steady. The desperation and fear that had filled her for so long were finally beginning to fade. She still had nightmares sometimes, dreams of fire and screaming and her husband's face disappearing behind closing doors, but the dreams came less often now. Healing took time. She was learning to be patient. Baby was not a baby anymore. He was crawling everywhere, exploring every corner of the farmhouse, putting everything in his mouth. He had learned to say a few words, a mix of Korean and that made laugh and shake his head in confusion. He was healthy and curious and full of energy, just like any normal child should be. Had grown the most. She was no longer the silent, frightened girl who had arrived on Earth wrapped in her mother's arms. She talked constantly now, sometimes in Korean, sometimes in both languages at once. She followed around the farm, helping him with the animals, learning about plants and weather and all the small miracles of Earth. She called him Hal grandfather in Korean, and he called her Little Star. The village had kept its promise. People came regularly with food and supplies. Grandmother had learned to make a special version of her rice cakes that the aliens could eat. She was very proud of this, though she pretended it was no big deal. Schoolteacher gave lessons 3 times a week, teaching her to read and write in Korean. Young children from the village came to play with her, and though they sometimes stared at her skin and large eyes, they quickly forgot about the differences. Children are good at forgetting differences. Adults could learn a lot from them. Continued her research in secret. She studied the biology, learned about their history, documented everything she could. She knew that someday the world would find out about the aliens, and when that day came, she wanted to be ready. She wanted to be able to protect them with science and facts and understanding. Just continued being. He woke up early every morning, made tea, and did his work. But now he was not alone. Now he had company. Now he had purpose. One evening in early summer found him sitting on the porch, looking up at the stars. She sat down beside him, 2 cups of tea in her hands, green for him, nutrient drink for her. They had shared this ritual many times over the past months. Words were not always necessary between them anymore. I found it, said quietly. Looked at her, found what? Pointed up at the sky toward a cluster of stars near the horizon. The signal, a rescue transmission. There are survivors, another colony ship. They escaped the Dominion. Was quiet for a moment. That is good news. Yes, very good news. Paused. They are coming here to Earth. They received my emergency beacon. They will arrive in 2 cycles, about 2 of your Earth years. Nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come eventually. He had known that the little family on his farm was just the beginning, but hearing it now, hearing it out loud, made it feel more real. How many survivors? He asked. The message said 300, mostly families, children. His voice cracked slightly. So many lost, so few remaining. 300, coming to Earth, coming to this small planet that barely knew about life on other worlds, coming to ask for help just as had asked for help 6 months ago. What will happen to them? Asked. Shook her head. I do not know. Earth is not ready. Your people do not know we exist. When the ship arrives, there will be fear. There will be chaos. There will be... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Understood. He had lived through the border conflicts. He had seen what humans could do to each other when they were afraid. Different language, different skin, different culture, all excuses for violence and hatred. How much worse would it be when the difference was an entirely different species from an entirely different world? Then we must prepare, he said firmly. We have 2 years. We must use that time to make the world ready. Looked at him with wonder. How? How do you prepare an entire planet for something like this? Smiled his weathered smile. The same way I prepared this village, one person at a time. The next morning called a village meeting. He told everyone about the message, about the survivors, about the ship that was coming. He told them that in 2 years, Earth would face the biggest change in human history, and that this small village on this small mountain had a chance to lead the way. The villagers were scared. Of course they were scared. This was not a single family anymore. This was 300 aliens with more possibly coming after them. This was a responsibility that went far beyond a little farmhouse and a few extra mouths to feed. But they had spent 6 months learning about they had seen grow from a terrified child into a laughing, curious girl. They had watched transform from a broken refugee into a strong, hopeful mother. They had held baby in their arms and felt his tiny, four-fingered hand grip their fingers. They knew the truth that the rest of the world did not yet know. Aliens were not monsters. Aliens were just people. Different people, strange people, people who needed help. And helping people in need was what communities did. Stood up and spoke for the village. We started something 6 months ago, he said. We took a chance. We chose kindness when we could have chosen fear. Are we going to stop now? Are we going to turn back? The answer was no. The answer was unanimous. Over the next 2 years, the village worked harder than it had ever worked before. They expanded the farms to grow more food. They built new houses designed for biology, warmer, more suited to desert-dwelling creatures. They trained themselves to understand language and culture. They prepared for the arrival of 300 strangers who would need everything. Word spread slowly, carefully, to other villages, other cities, other countries. Published her research under a false name, planting seeds of understanding in scientific communities around the world. Stories began appearing in newspapers and websites, rumors of visitors from the stars, hints that humanity was not alone. Some people dismissed the stories as nonsense. Some people were afraid, but some people, enough people, began to wonder. They began to hope. The day the colony ship arrived, the world held its breath. Cameras pointed at the sky. Satellites tracked the approaching vessel. Governments mobilized armies, prepared defenses, braced for the worst. Fear gripped the planet. This was the moment humanity had imagined for centuries, and now that it was here, no one knew what would happen. The ship landed in a field near the mountain village. 300 emerged, thin and tired and scared, just as and her children had been 2 years ago. They stood in the earth sunlight, blinking their large, dark eyes, trembling in the unfamiliar air. They expected to be attacked. They expected to be captured. They expected the worst because the worst was all they had ever known. Instead, they saw a crowd of humans waiting for them with open hands. They saw tables covered with food, both human and varieties. They saw blankets and clothes and medical supplies. They saw children waving and adults smiling and an entire community ready to welcome them. And standing at the front of the crowd, they saw an old man and a skinned woman side by side, and human and friends. Stepped forward and spoke to her people in their native language. "I know you are afraid," she said. "I was afraid too when I first came here. I thought I would die. I thought my children would die. But this human," she gestured to, "this simple farmer on a small mountain found me in the snow and gave me everything he had. He fed me when I was starving. He warmed me when I was freezing. He protected me when I was vulnerable." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "The humans are young. They are not perfect. Some of them will fear us. Some will hate us. But many of them, so many of them, have hearts bigger than any I have ever known. They looked at strangers from the stars and saw only people in need. They chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier. They opened their world to us when they could have closed their doors." She turned to look at the village behind her, at the humans and aliens already living together, already sharing meals and stories and laughter. "This is not just a refuge," she said. "This is a beginning, the start of something new, a partnership between our species that could change the galaxy." She smiled, tears running down her face. "If we survive the Dominion, if we rebuild our civilization, it will be because of allies like this, because of humans like this." She looked at who was watching her with proud, wet eyes. "They just do not know how extraordinary they are yet." That night, the village held a celebration. Humans and sat together around massive bonfires, sharing food and drinks and stories. Children chased each other through the grass, human and alien mixed together, laughing and playing without any awareness that they were supposed to be different. Sat on his porch watching it all, was curled against his side half asleep, her skin warm from the summer air, was running around with the other young children, squealing with joy, was helping the new arrivals, guiding them to food and shelter, being the same source of hope for them that had been for her. Came and sat beside him. "You did this," she said quietly. "You changed the world." Shook his head. "I just found some people in the snow. Anyone would have done the same." But they both knew that was not true. Anyone would not have done the same. Many people would have turned away. Many people would have been too afraid, too selfish, too small. But had chosen differently. He had seen creatures that looked nothing like him and recognized something deeper than appearance, something that connected all thinking beings across the universe. He had seen people in need. And he had helped. Above them, the stars shone brightly in the summer sky. Somewhere out there, the Dominion still conquered, wars still raged, evil still cast its shadow across the galaxy. But here, on this small planet, in this small village, something new was growing. A seed of hope, a light in the darkness, a promise that the universe could be different, kinder, gentler, more united. Shifted against the side and looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Hal," she murmured, "are we safe now?" Stroked her smooth head gently. He thought about all the challenges ahead, the fears and conflicts and difficulties that would come as two species learned to live together. Nothing would be easy. Nothing would be simple. But they had each other. They had hope. They had the stubborn human refusal to give up. "Yes, little star," he said softly, "we are safe." Smiled and closed her eyes. In the farmhouse behind them, in the village below, in the field where 300 refugees were finally finding rest, life continued. Strange life. New life. Life that had been almost impossible just 2 years ago. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe, not with weapons or conquest, but with kindness and shelter. Not by showing its strength, but by showing its heart. And in the end, that made all the difference. The galaxy would learn about humans eventually. The great empires would hear about this small species from a small planet who had welcomed strangers from the stars. They would wonder about these creatures who chose compassion over fear, community over isolation, hope over despair. And maybe, just maybe, some of them would want to be more like that too. Because if a 63-year-old farmer on a frozen mountain could change the fate of refugees from another world, then anything was possible. Absolutely anything.